Welcome, dearly cherished, chosen ones. Stealing from strangers is a crime. Steal from a particular individual. It's a cosmic catastrophe. Let it soak in, because what you'll witness is more than just a courtroom drama. It's a lovely narrative twist that has been growing from infancy. Also, spoiler alert, God does not lose cases. The whispers are becoming louder. The records are surfacing, and someone will learn the hard way that karma stores receipts in high resolution. This isn't your typical family dispute over land. No, this was a premeditated heist disguised as funeral attire and phony embraces. They believe you were too innocent, broken, and mute to fight back. However, there is a problem with the ones chosen. We do not just rise. We recover. When we return, we bring spreadsheets, timestamps, and angelic back to judicial standards. Oh, and don't forget those who previously told you it wasn't about money. It's about love. When it came time to split the estate, I abruptly lost recall. Isn't it remarkable how rapidly our family has grown? That's my inheritance. When a signature enters the will. But guess what? You did not simply walk in and win the case. You stepped in, making the gavel tremble. So, buckle up. Because the truth has been buried for far too long. Today, criminal accusations are stacking up, and no amount of crocodile tears can stop them. Let's get to it. Number 1, they fought you for something that was already yours. Now the law is after them for taking something that was never theirs. They battled for something that already had your name on it. Something that did not need debate, manipulation, or dishonesty since it was yours from the start. You didn't steal it. You didn't ask for it. You just needed the courage to claim what was already part of your destiny. But they didn't see it that way. They saw you as a threat just because you stood up for yourself. They try to make you feel like an intruder at your own table. It's as if asking questions makes you mad. As if you were causing unnecessary conflict by just defending what was legally and spiritually yours. What's surprising is how confidently they behaved in their wrongdoing. Tampering with documentation, hiding assets behind closed doors, whispering in corners, and seeking favors. All of this was done with the arrogance of those who believed they would never be caught. They anticipated the system would protect them, that you wouldn't know how to use it, and that you'd leave due to exhaustion or fear. They didn't realize, however, that the same mechanism that had previously captured others was now paying attention. Their names are now being evaluated. Currently, criminal charges are being considered. The evidence they thought they destroyed is being found, dusted off, and reassembled like jigsaw pieces. The lies are unraveling faster than they can explain away. Their own documents betray them. You fought wisely, not dirty. They underestimated how much you had developed. They anticipated you to have a breakdown. Instead, you disrupted the cycle. The law is closing in, and this is what they didn't anticipate. The courtroom where they attempted to convict you is now being utilized to prosecute them. Every false signature, questionable bank transfer, an email they thought was deleted has now been highlighted. You did not just win the inheritance. You showed their character. You didn't ruin them. They completed this on their own. You just disclosed the truth and enabled justice to exist. And now you get the inheritance while others suffer the consequences. Number 2, they try to paint you as greedy, but the receipts show they've been feeding off you like leeches for years. They tried to portray you as greedy, as if you sprang out of nowhere to grab something that did not belong to you. They whispered things like, "Look at them just turning up now that there's money involved," as if you hadn't been silently suffering while they feasted on the same heritage they wanted to steal from you. However, the truth has a unique way of expressing itself quantitatively. Because when the receipts were obtained, the full story emerged, and they had their hands in the cookie jar the whole time. They were draining accounts, moving assets, and profiting from benefits that were meant to be shared or were never intended for them in the first place. They described you as entitled, yet they were the ones receiving the benefits of someone else's legacy, doing so behind closed doors as if no one noticed. You weren't the greedy one. You were the only one who ventured to ask, "Where is the money really going?" That question threw everything wide open. They were unprepared for the level of proof you offered. You had deadlines, declarations, signatures, and talks that they swore would be kept private, all written down and attached to legal paperwork. It was never about money for you. It was about being robbed while being gaslighted into thinking you were the problem. They tried to edit the script, but they didn't realize the receipts would reverse it. Furthermore, the vast majority of what they confiscated was unneeded. It was not about survival. It was ego control. A wicked urge to keep you little while they played hero with stolen blessings. However, now that everything is out in the open, the mask is slipped, revealing who they really are. Not the peacemakers or the responsible ones, but the quiet leeches who used grief, trust, and family bonds for personal gain. You did not damage their reputation. You reveal their acts. And it turns out that the most greedy character in the story was the one fighting the hardest to hide the truth. The court has now seen it, and charges will be filed soon. Third, they didn't expect you to read the fine print, but you did. They counted on your ignorance. They anticipated you'd stay confused, upset, and overwhelmed, too broken or overcome with sorrow to read the small print. They assumed you would not dare to ask questions, much alone read between the lines. That was their first mistake, since while they were busy plotting behind your back, you were learning things they didn't want you to know. You weren't just replying. You were researching. You did not merely get emotional. You get educated. They were used to dealing with people who gave up when things proved too difficult. But you refused to give up. You sat with the documents they tried to hide. You researched the legal terms that they thought would scare you. They assumed you would never ask challenging questions. You paid attention. And as you grew more aware of what to look for, the trap they had laid for you started to unravel. You didn't simply come up with accusations. You came with facts. Real facts. Signed paperwork, dates that did not match, and totals that did not add up. You gave such compelling evidence that the whole courtroom had to sit up straighter while they attempted to make you look as an emotional wreck. You moved like a person who has studied the blueprint. Every move you made was planned. Every assignment you assigned placed them in circumstances they couldn't get out of. They didn't expect you to outsmart them. That's what bothers them the most. They were certain that their early advantage, friends, and access would ensure their long-term dominance. However, you turned the game around with calm, clarity, and honesty. There's no drama, simply receipts. You didn't need to yell. You did not have to threaten me. Allow the papers to talk. You let the facts expose the fraud. You turned their web of lies into such a clear case that even their own lawyer had to exercise caution. This is the distinction between someone who replies and someone who is awake. They tried to fool you with documents, but you saw it as prophecy. And now the trap they set for you has become the very paperwork that is going to get them in serious trouble. Number 4. Their lives weren't only disclosed. They were stored in legally binding documents that could not be undone. They thought they were being clever by speaking lies in private, altering stories at family gatherings, and inventing timelines that only made sense in their minds. They got away with it for very some time. People believed them. You were called theatrical, spiteful, or delusional. But they weren't expecting this. They didn't just lie. They left a paper trail. And now those trails have been stamped, filed, signed, and sealed in court records, and they cannot be erased with another bogus apology or fabricated debate. This isn't some family gossip you want anymore. Deception is now documented with case numbers, official stamps, and witness testimony. Their bogus stories were compelling enough to persuade a few unsuspecting people. However, they lacked the strength to survive legal investigation. And when everything was revealed, their lies couldn't last. They sank into the same ink they tried to bury you in. You did not need to destroy them. They completed everything on their own. And the greatest part, they put it in writing. They signed the papers, demonstrating their intent. Arrogance became evidence. Their avarice resulted in a confession. They tried to make you seem threatening, but in their rush to cover their tracks, they fell over their own contradictions. Their story is now unchanging. It is kept in cold, hard legal papers such as certified statements, bank records, emails, contracts, and letters that are all dated, sealed, and refer back to them. There is no turning back, no rewriting history, and no spin that can undo what has already been accepted and branded as fact. The device they thought would protect them has now forever documented their manipulation. Their lies are no longer buried behind closed doors. They are permanent evidence in a case that might cost them their freedom, reputation, or both. And the best part, you didn't have to shout. You did not need to beg. You just permitted the truth to be stated via documents that they stupidly assumed would protect them. Instead, they notarized their own death. Number 5. They saw your silence as weakness. But you were gathering ammunition during the silence. They believed that your quiet meant you had given up. They ridiculed your quiet, figuring it represented defeat. They assumed you had no fight left in you, that you were too overwhelmed, fatigued, or weak to fight back. They failed to realize, however, that quiet does not entail surrender. Sometimes it is all about strategy. While they were busy talking trash and behaving unclean, you were watching, gathering, and storing every lie, contradiction, and questionable activity, as if this were evidence. Because it was. You weren't just sitting still. You were becoming more lethal as you prepared. Every time they mocked you behind closed doors, you took mental notes. Each time they misunderstood you, they gave you an advantage. You knew if you moved too quickly, they'd see you coming. So you waited. You were sensible, not scared. You let them get comfortable with their plans. Allow them to slip up. Allow them to create the exact story they will eventually have to answer for. When you revealed your hand, it was too late for them to clean up the mess. You had everything organized: facts, dates, paperwork, inconsistencies, no emotion, just precision. You were not driven by vengeance. You were motivated by clarity. The case you prepared was so powerful and thorough that even the most skilled liars couldn't escape. The beauty of it all. You did it without theatrics. You let the truth do the talking. They always assume that the loudest person wins. However, you reminded them that genuine strength does not create noise. It moves with purpose. You weren't trying to prove anything. You were going to demolish everything built on lies. But the same calm they mocked has transformed into a storm that is tearing their whole illusion apart. You did not just wait in silence. You weaponized it. And then it's silence. They never anticipated Dom to execute justice with such severity. Number 6. You did not just win an inheritance. You broke a hereditary curse. This was never only about property, money, or material assets. It was about legacy. It was about finally standing up to a cycle that had been silently repeating for generations, the kind of dysfunction that hides behind titles like tradition and respect while allowing betrayal, manipulation, and spiritual theft, the kind of patterns that taught family members to remain silent, suffer in silence, and allow the most toxic person in the room to lead the bloodline like a dictator in a family photograph. You didn't merely win a legal battle. You broke into a vault of generational ruins. You revealed the same thing that had kept everyone psychologically and emotionally trapped for years. This case uncovered every skeleton in the closet, including favoritism, dishonesty, backdoor deals, and abuse concealed under polite smiles and Sunday greetings. You disclosed what everyone knew but was reluctant to speak. The money just scraped the surface. What you truly got was the opportunity to break the cycle, which you took with bravery, clarity, and a spirit that said, no more pretending, no more silence, no more hiding behind family loyalty while evil runs the show. That's what they weren't expecting. They anticipated it to be another hush sweep under the rug, another generation bullied into submission. But not this time. You did not just collect what was owed to you. You forced the whole bloodline to confront itself. You established a dysfunctional system. Look in the mirror, it has broken. The inheritance was not just something you received. It was something you redeemed. And you did more than just alter your own life. You changed the spiritual blueprint for everyone in your lineage, including your future offspring, siblings, nieces, and nephews. They'll never have to bow to the same twisted structure again since you burned it down. You didn't simply win. You've broken the spell. And from the ashes of their manipulation, you grew something they did not expect. Truth number 7. They expected you to be the controversy, but now they are the headline. They were attempting to control the narrative before the truth could be spoken. So they moved rapidly, spreading lies about you and whispering half-truths to anybody who would listen, twisting events so they seemed to be the victims. They wanted people to believe you were unstable, entitled, angry, or worse, a threat to the family. They realized exactly what they were doing. Smear you first. Even if the truth came out, people would be too biased to believe you. But here's where it all fails. You didn't bite. You did not lash out, lose your wits, or explode in front of witnesses, as they predicted. You stay grounded. You let them run their tongues and hang themselves with their own rope. And then genuine facts started to surface. Documents, communications, audio recordings, and inconsistencies. The house of lies they built began to disintegrate at an alarming rate. Now, the individuals who worked so hard to identify you as the problem are being investigated. Their identities are revealed in court filings. People who are worried with their sob stories or social status are discussing their actions. The same tongues that boldly lied about you must now defend themselves under oath. And that doesn't look good. Their effort to tell a story has completely failed. The alleged scandal they intended to attach to your name has now been affixed to theirs, with legal consequences. The drama they sought to build around you has now become a reality. They didn't just project. They confessed with projection, and the court system recognized the pattern. They wanted to distract attention from their wrongdoings by damaging your reputation. But their reputation is worsening. Not from rumors, but from real evidence. You did not need to disclose them. They unveil themselves in an effort to bury you. The only difference is that you rose, and they are now buried under the lies they perpetrated. They wanted your name to be nasty. They now have no influence over the headlines that bear their name. Number 8. The court did not just hear you. They believed you because the truth pulsated. You did not enter the courtroom looking for sympathy. You came in with something far more powerful, an undeniable reality. You did not arrive with theatrics. You didn't have to cry on cue or put on a show. Your reality did not need makeup or alteration. It came ragged, lived in, and fully alive. And when you spoke, people did not just listen. They felt it. The energy moved. You were not just telling your side of the story. You were revealing a truth that cut through turmoil, dishonesty, and lies. You did not stumble over your words because you had not practiced. It was not a speech. This was your life. Every comment you made was meaningful because it was founded on experience, pain, tenacity, and unchangeable truth. You did not have to embellish anything. You did not have to exaggerate the truth. It stood alone, breathing, pulsing, and evident. They expected someone emotional and broken, easily rejected. Instead, they found clarity, consistency, and conviction. You didn't flinch. You didn't get lost in the crowd. You arrived prepared and confident in what you knew to be true. Not because you were instructed, but because you saw it personally. The whole room was aware of this. The judge could feel it. Even their lawyers noticed the shift. The bitter realization that you were not there to win the battle. You were there to reveal one. This is the reason they believed you. Not because of your tone or appearance, but because truth occurs often. When it's real, there's no need to yell. It just sat there, undeniable and unbreakable. The court didn't just hear your story. They felt the weight of a life that had been violated and betrayed but not destroyed at that moment. Justice did not suddenly become achievable. It became inescapable since the truth did not appear in that courtroom. It was the one swinging the gavel. Number 9. They imagined that their titles would protect them, but their status became Exhibit A. They were so fascinated with their own titles that they thought they were untouchable. Executors, elders, affluent persons, and self-appointed guardians of the family lineage all felt that their positions would shield them from accountability. They believed that since they had power, they could twist the facts, change history, and suppress any criticism. But they were wrong. In fact, the very titles they took pride in turned out to be the most revealing of their depravity. They behaved as if their status empowered them to steal, manipulate, and silence. And for a while, it worked. People deferred to them. They were seen as responsible. The family's pillars, the ones who knew best. However, power without ethics is a very unstable situation. And as the investigation developed, it became clear that their authority was not founded on character. It was inherited, exploited, and abused. All the signatures they thought would protect them are now being questioned. Every decision made on behalf of the family is being examined. Their work did not protect them. It exposed them. They signed the paperwork and transferred the assets. They treated you like an outsider while claiming to be the castle's king or queen. Everything is being left exposed. Instead of being seen as trustworthy leaders, they are now regarded as traitors. Their failure was not due to your objections. It was owing to their entitlement. They were not intimidated by your assertions. They were intimidated by your clarity because the moment you stopped backing down, their entire act crumbled. Their arrogance undermined their credibility. Their obsession with control eventually ruined their legacy. The courtroom no longer regards them solely as family members or professionals. It sees them as defendants with titles. They are no longer considered badges of honor. They are Exhibit A in a case demonstrating that abuse of authority is not only immoral, but also illegal. Number 10. You discovered a family secret so deep that it took a legal earthquake to break free. This instance involved more than just shaking a table. It shook a foundation built on decades of suppressed truths, forced unity, and prepared smiles. You did not simply discover a family secret. You shattered the silence that had been passed down for years, if not generations. Everyone sensed that something was wrong. People sensed tension, partiality, hidden agreements, and unspoken hurts. However, no one discussed it. It was easier to protect the image than to face the virus, until you. You were the one who dared to venture where no one else would. Enter the vault of denial. They conceal their transgressions beneath picture albums, church pews, and respectable titles. You refuse to keep pretending. You refuse to remain silent for the sake of keeping the peace. In reality, the tranquility was nothing more than a controlled hush based on fear. When you stood out, you did more than just cause a ruckus. You triggered a legal earthquake, forcing everyone in the family to seek shelter. What they tried to keep hidden leaked out. Illegitimate documents, bogus wills, forged signatures, financial exploitation, and manipulation. Everything started unraveling the moment you pulled one thread. Even those who were not directly involved had to face the facts. For far too long, this family had behaved like a well-dressed cult, putting appearance above justice. What made your viewpoint so powerful was that it did more than simply set you free. It triggered a rupture in the cycle. You disclosed what others were too afraid to say. You brought the truth out of hiding. By doing so, you gave future generations the option to be cleaner, freer, and more honest. No more secrets handed down as heirlooms. Lies are no longer acceptable as societal standards. You forced the past to face a trial, giving the future a fresh start. They may loathe you for what you revealed, but they understand that something had to be done, and you were the only one with the courage to break the silence. A number. You weren't competing only for money. You were trying to be acknowledged as a person. This was not a debate over material goods. It was about being seen as genuine, valuable, and noticeable. For too long, you were treated as an afterthought, as if your presence wasn't important. They saw your presence as an inconvenience that could be overlooked until they needed something. They used your silence as permission to remove you, and your sadness as a reason to disregard you. However, when it came to dividing the assets, your name became very crucial. Not to include you, but to exclude you again. More official. They did not simply want to strip you of your inheritance. They intended to completely eliminate you from the story, as if you never existed, as if you didn't belong. Your lineage relationship seems less credible than theirs. This is what made it so personal. It wasn't about the property. It was about how they treated you as an outsider in the family you were born into. You fought not for what they had, but for who you really are. You did not ask for more. You wanted recognition. You requested to not be ignored. I refused to stay silent, not to be turned invisible because it fit their tale. They wanted to pretend you didn't have the right to speak, that your place in the family did not come with inheritance, love, or legal status. But you flipped the script. You said that there would be no more disappearances to keep the peace. You advocated not just for money, but also for your name, identity, and birthright. And that is why it affected them so hard. They knew precisely what they were doing. They understand that they tried to exile you without explanation in order to keep everything in the hands of persons they deemed worthy. But they underestimated your strength, presence, and right to be here. You did not just compete for assets. You fought for acceptance as a full person against a family that wanted you to shrink, vanish, or keep mute. And win or lose, your opinions are no longer optional. It's documented, respected, and here to stay. A number. You were the family's black sheep until you became the justice-seeking shepherd. They always had a name ready for you. Difficult, unstable, very sensitive, too much. You were the family's favorite scapegoat, the one to blame when things went wrong. They insulted her in secret, yet smiled in public. They called you the black sheep since you did not obey their unwritten rules. You wondered what felt wrong. You saw what others claimed not to see. And for that, they exiled you. Perhaps not physically, but emotionally, spiritually, and interpersonally. You were presented as the problem when all you did was refuse to tolerate their dysfunction. They didn't anticipate the black sheep to have the best vision when they were busy maintaining illusions. You were starting to see through them as they polished their public image. You were looking for the truth while others spoke behind her back. You were prepping quietly. When the time arrived, the inheritance tragedy erupted and secrets spilled out. You weren't astounded. You were ready. You did not just enter into a court battle. You accepted a call. You became the one with the bravery to confront what others were too afraid to acknowledge. You faced not just financial challenges, but also power dynamics, manipulation, deception, and favoritism. You faced the wolves without armor and didn't flinch. That's when everything changed. The labels ceased sticking at that point since the psychotic person now had the receipts. The law started to side with the rebellious individual. The same people who tried to silence you are now asking your forgiveness. However, justice will not bend for guilt trips. Justice does not hesitate because the wolf has changed into sheep's clothing. You did not desire revenge. You asked for the truth. Even inside a family, the truth never favors anybody. You were never the black sheep. You were the first to break the spell, willing to give up comfort in order to gain insight. The one has the courage to lead a legacy out of falsehood and into the light. You did not just accept the system. You overthrew it. A number. Although the will was altered, destiny remained constant. They really felt they had the last word. They tinkered with legal documents as if they were rearranging furniture, changing names, tweaking percentages, and making changes behind the scenes. They too grew bold, acting as if no one would notice, as if their lies would slide through the gaps without consequences. But they overlooked one thing. Paper does not have more power than purpose. They may have altered the will, but they could not alter what was already written in the spirit. They saw their heredity as something they could control, as if meddling with ink and signatures could reverse a divine decree. They underestimated how thoroughly you were protected because, while they were revising contracts, heaven was upholding covenants. There was something bigger behind you. Something they couldn't pay you to change. You were always the lawful successor, not because of a piece of paper, but via divine alignment. And when destiny speaks, even if it is garbled, documents must be in place. Every forged page became a boomerang. What they thought would protect their standing showed their real character. And when the truth started to surface, it did not come easy. It came in force. Suddenly, the lawyers they expected to protect them began asking questions. The judges were seeing red flags. Investigators started to circle, knowing that no matter how deeply they bury the truth, it would inevitably emerge. This is what happens when something is divinely appointed. It refuses to stay hidden. Both the temporal and spiritual courts are now aligned. The truth stands tall in two dimensions, and there is no place for them to hide. The worldly judges are doing their jobs, but the spiritual court has already ruled in your favor. This is why everything is changing. This is why lies are tumbling faster than they can be refuted. They tampered with the will. They altered the paperwork. However, they forgot one key aspect. Destiny cannot be produced. Whatever you possess stays yours. False signatures cannot be prevented. What? Heaven has already approved the number. You didn't just win the case. You discovered the whole bloodline's wickedness. Winning the litigation was just the beginning. The underlying impact was far deeper, because what you truly did was to expose the truth that had been buried for decades. It wasn't just about one stolen riches or a forged will. It was about a trend. A terrible covert system that had been operating under the radar for far too long. A web of secrecy, control, and spiritual abuse had been the norm within that bloodline. And you, the one they counted out, exposed the whole charade. This was more than just what they took from you. It was about how they took from everyone in a calm, systematic manner, with perfect assurance that no one would ever notice. There were concealed bank accounts with missing funds. Family decisions were made behind closed doors, without the knowledge or consent of all those involved. There was emotional manipulation disguised as caring, and it was all passed down like some strange tradition. They weren't prepared for someone like you. You did not merely provide evidence. You've come with spiritual authority. You weren't just chasing justice. You were confronting corruption. They assumed that if they could just silence you, they would be able to keep things quiet. But every time they tried to calm you, they just revealed themselves more. Each denial showed another inconsistency. Each bogus apology revealed another fault in the system. The win is now official. However, the ripple effect has only just begun. Because you didn't just get what was yours. You discovered how they had been functioning for years, maybe decades. You encouraged the family to look in the mirror, and the reflection is not pleasant. Judgment has started, and it is contagious. Others are speaking up. Other relatives are making inquiry. Their system is collapsing because its foundation of lies, favoritism, and manipulation is finally being undermined. You didn't simply win. You turned on the lights in a house that had been dark for far too long. And now, every shadow they tried to conceal had nowhere to go. They tried to make you the villain. They tried to silence your truth, erase your identity, and seize what was never theirs to claim. But in the end, they just exposed themselves. It wasn't just about the inheritance. It was about identity, justice, and legacy. And the spiritual war was disguised as a legal battle. You weren't just safeguarding property. You were reclaiming your birthright while also exposing a long-standing falsehood. You didn't just survive the fire. You marched through it, bearing papers, knowledge, and destiny. When you spoke, the whole courtroom heard you. They felt the strength of truth tremble, the precise foundation of every falsehood ever said in your name. You didn't have to shout or sabotage. You permitted the facts to cause damage. You let the truth sit on the seat next to you, speaking louder than any performance. And when the dust settled, you didn't just have a judgment. You were overseeing a generational change. You didn't only obtain what they tried to take. You lifted the curse that allowed them to steal from others. You exposed secrets, dispelled illusions, and drove judgment to fall exactly where it was intended to. Not just in a court of law, but also in a court of spirit. Their titles no longer protect them. Their silence won't protect them. The methods they used to cover their tracks are now acting against them. They anticipated the black sheep to go down gently. You just became the whistleblower of a whole bloodline, and you did not come seeking retribution. You came looking for answers. And now that it has here, the truth has been spoken forever and publicly, powerfully. Let this serve as a warning to everyone who seeks to alter what heaven has already decreed. Because when a chosen one rises, justice does not knock. It enters with authority. If this message affected you, or if the words reminded you of your own story, if you've had goosebumps because you've been duped, erased, or undervalued and despised, here is the place for you. Make sure you subscribe to the channel right now, not just to show your support, but also to stay connected to truth, bravery, and raw spiritual power that does not play it safe. We're not sugarcoating anything here. We're exposing systems, breaking the silence, and speaking things most people are afraid to express. If this video spoke to you, please like it because each like helps to push this truth into the algorithm, where others in need will ultimately find it. Comment here to make your voice heard. You're not crazy. You're not alone. And trust me, your experience is valuable. Let us build a community that looks beyond performance and stands for something authentic. Share this video with someone who has been suffering in silence. Someone who needs reassurance that they are not dreaming about the injustice. Let this video serve as the confirmation they've been waiting for. This is more than simply materials. This is a fantastic experience. And trust me, we're just getting started. So hit the subscribe button. Because the truth is going forward, and you must be a part of it. God bless you.